So it seems as if every week there's a new victim of police brutality. Overuse of force, which is their sugarcoating and polite way of saying physically attacking, beating up, tasering, shooting, or even killing people. The number of cases and victims of police violence who we have worked with, has increased so much in recent years. We have fought alongside many different families and in so many different communities in the last couple months alone, and not just in Southern California, but nationally. It is almost as if the cases of police brutality have tripled. But the interesting thing, sisters and brothers, is that it's not that police brutality has dramatically increased in our communities. Police brutality has been running rampant for a long time now. It seems the difference now, the only reason why we're hearing about this, so many cases, is because people are beginning to see that they are not alone and that there are people who are speaking up and fighting back against police violence. And that there are fighting organizations like the Answer Coalition ready and willing to organize and demand justice for victims of police brutality. Police brutality is a national epidemic. Police departments all over the nation continue to terrorize and harass poor and working class communities, and especially people of color. A community that has been under intense attacks by the police is the city of Long Beach. In the past year or so, we have worked on about 10 cases, 2 of which were killed by the Long Beach Police Department, and 2 of which I personally have known. So the most recent victim of trigger-happy police officers was Soka Hoare, who was shot on January 7th by undercover cops. So basically what happened was that him and his girlfriend were sitting in a vehicle in an alley, and 2 white guys in an SUV pull up and shine their lights on the car. So Soka gets out of the car, and when he does, they shoot at him twice, hitting him once in his chest. So they sent, the media obviously covered it, and the police, the reports that were sent out were basically saying that he pulled out a gun on them, and that they found 2 assault weapons near the vehicle or near the area. I don't know what that even means. It could be like miles away, they never said where. But the girlfriend who was in the car, as well as other witnesses who have been coming forward, have said that they did announce themselves. So these are just 2 plainclothes white guys who come up and are like, hey, so any rational person would be like, let me go see what's going on. Or at least I would. I don't know about everyone else. The family was not told what had happened. They were not contacted. The police, didn't feel the need to contact them. They treated them in a very, like he wasn't even human, basically, or that they didn't deserve that respect. They heard about it on the news. So he was transported to St. Mary's Hospital, which is in Long Beach, and the family, when they did go, they demanded that they were able to visit their family member and were denied. And one of the police officers even told the mother that they would contact her if he died. So that just goes to show the way that, the police interact with the community, especially communities of color. And so they organized the rally, and 75 people came from the community and family members. And then, they contacted us and asked us if we could help organize petitions and contact the media, as well as organize another rally. So throughout that week, the community, supporters, and people in the Answer Coalition and in the PSL basically contacted the police department. They were bombarding them with phone calls and the petitions and all sorts of things. The media was harassing the police department with trying to get more information. And so they really felt the pressure. So 10 days later, they allowed the family to finally be able to see Soka, so the mother and father were able to. But with that, they made all these crazy rules, basically saying that only 2 people could visit him per week, and only for 30 minutes, and they couldn't have been to jail ever, and they couldn't have had a felony, and all these crazy bogus rules, even though there's no protocol. So they could have let the family see him at any point. They just didn't want to. And that just goes to show the power play that was in place. The family, however, decided that they still wanted to have an additional rally, which we had called after they had got the visitation rights, which the detectives who they were in contact with kept telling them that they should not have it because they were granted the visitation. The family was very militant and said, no, we're going to continue to do it because there are too many victims of police brutality. So that Sunday, we had a rally and march, and there were over 300 people at its peak. It was very militant. The slogans changed from humanity for SOCA to justice for all victims of police brutality, and, you know, basically for their family to be treated with dignity. And there were signs that said, like, shoot first, lie later. So the demands became very, very militant, and the family was very pleased and surprised at how much support the community and, you know, the Answer Coalition was giving them. And there were so many other families who came who were also victims of police violence in Long Beach and in surrounding areas. So the most recent update with the SOCA case is that they got a lawyer who is now helping them and working on their case. And the best update is that SOCA is no longer in critical condition or life support. He's out of the ICU, so that's great. You know, this is just one of the many incidences that have been happening in Long Beach. You know, they immediately tried to say that, you know, he was a known gang member and that he was a criminal, and they were looking for him for burglary charges, and that's why they shot him, as if those are any justifications to just randomly shooting people while there's another person in the car who they could have also shot or killed. Another case in Long Beach is John Cabrera, which many of you have probably heard of, but just to give a little background, on May 14, 2011, just a few minutes after 11 p.m., Cabrera answered a knock at his door to find a police officer with a gun pointed at his face. So he did what, again, any rational person would do and shut the door. The gun-wielding officer never announced a reason for his presence and never showed a search warrant, and did not give any cause as to why he was at the house. Over 30 bullets were found in the apartment, and Cabrera was hit twice in his arm and torso. Recently, after months of LBPD harassment, John Cabrera accepted a deal. He was faced with 3 years in prison, reduced from potentially 5 years, and his recent trial in December led to a hung jury as cops blatantly lied on the stand and gave sharply conflicting testimony, which many of you were probably at some of those dreadful days. The PSL mobilized to fill the courtroom each day during his trial and garnered support that reflected the working class. At that point, the lawyers became far more concessionary as they feared the potential of repeat failures, and LBPD increased the harassment of John. Under these conditions, John accepted a deal. That, due to time earned and served, would have John in jail for about 10 days. It is critical to point out that without the people's movement around John's case and the work of John and his partner Elizabeth, John would have quickly been thrown in jail for a longer sentence, proving that only people's struggle can have a direct impact on any battle with crooked cops. So the LBPD is responsible for an average of about a dozen officer-involved shootings each year, most targeting people of color. Long Beach had a higher per capita rate of shootings than New York City in 2010, and has on other occasions as well. Keep in mind that New York City has about millions more people. I don't even think Long Beach hits the million people. Yeah, that's crazy. So in both of the incidences, police have tried to harass and intimidate them in order to provoke fear and silence, but they have not succeeded. Elizabeth and John, as well as SOCA's family, have been brave and tirelessly fighting to stop police violence and for justice. The officers in both cases are still out on the street and facing no consequences for the shootings. Police are given the go-ahead to continue to harass, intimidate, and shoot people at their whim. We demand that the cops responsible should be fired and face charges immediately. Every day, police launch brutality and harassment against working class people, whether it's Sean Bell in New York, or Oscar Grant in Oakland, or John Cabrera and SoCo Core here in Long Beach. Police brutality is a major issue all across the country. So it's important to look at the role of the police. It is essential when confronting police brutality that we understand the role of the police in capitalist society. It spans far beyond any individual officer and even beyond particular corrupt and brutal police departments. In State and Revolution, Lenin admonished that the state is an organ of class rule, in which the police act as the muscle to suppress the working class. We see the police as an integral part of the state used to strike fear into poor and working class community. All over the country. They are the essential component of the capitalist state. Throughout the history of capitalism, the forces of enforcement, the forces that make sure that the system of exploitation stay intact, are what Lenin called these special bodies of armed men and women, including the police. Police brutality is a preferred form of social control in the U.S. It is institutionalized and is deeply entrenched in capitalist society as exploitation itself. The corporate-owned media, whether it's Fox News or the Press Telegram in Long Beach, or there's so many of them, always try to blame the victims of police brutality. Immediately after incidences, police have the audacity to outrageously blame victims for getting killed or shot, and the police involved were just doing their job. They present fabricated facts as though the cops had no choice but to shoot these individuals. They say they're gang members or criminals as if, again, these are justifications for police to shoot or to kill them. These attempts by the police to discredit or vilify the victims come as no surprise. Even in the cases of the most blatant misconduct by the police, the killing is reduced to a few bad apples. Such a widespread social issue cannot be the result of a handful of few bad cops, though, nor can it be reduced to merely an issue of misconduct. Police brutality is naturally embedded into the system of exploitation. So let's just look quickly at historical. So the day-to-day humiliation of police brutality, racial profiling, and police murders has historically provoked hundreds of massive rebellions. For example, the famous uprising in Harlem in 1935 and Watts in 1965 were both provoked by police harassment and violence. When the cops who beat Rodney King were acquitted in 1992, the black community in Los Angeles erupted in justified rebellion. Over 16,000 people were arrested and at least 55 were killed when the U.S. government sent tens of thousands of police, National Guard, Marines, and Army soldiers to suppress the insurrection. Here in the U.S., we've also seen examples of organized political resistance manifest itself throughout history. So in the 60s, revolutionary organizations such as the Black Panthers challenged the police. It was the police brutality case of Denzil Doyle in 1967 here in California that catapulted the Panthers to the vanguard of the movement in Oakland and San Francisco. Just 1 year after the Hunters Point Rebellion, the Panthers began armed patrols to patrol the racist police, and in return, the masses of people saw that the police are not invincible. The thought of these rebellions and organized action strikes fear in the heart of the ruling class. When workers and oppressed people like you and me recognize the police as an element of class rule and begin to see ourselves as an oppressed class and unite together and continue to fight and struggle as a class, then we can officially fight back against the attacks of the police unleashed on our community. Racism and police brutality are a byproduct of capitalism. As revolutionaries, we must continue to fight back against police brutality. We must build a movement that puts the struggle against racist police brutality at the forefront of the struggle against capitalism. Stop police violence and justice for all victims of police brutality. Thank you.